All right, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of Nights in a Kitchen, our fledgling and short-run podcast talking the Netflix original series, The Defenders. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, I am one of your co-hosts, Gascally Stamus, here with Mr. Dave Pecci, fellow video team member from the E2KG network on YouTube. Dave, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm struggling. So, as always, of course, I decided to throw some new tech up on the block and try and run a podcast with it. And of course, as always, it shot me right in the keister. So,
Well, there you have it, everybody. We're cutting edge here on the.
right. So we're getting started a little bit later here tonight than usual. It is 11 p.m. here on the East Coast. We are here tonight to talk. So, Nights in a Kitchen, like I said, is our podcast covering the Netflix show The Defenders. The play on words is because I think of these characters much more so as the Marvel Knights, which was, I guess, a short-run comic that was in the Marvel Universe, kind of focusing on the street-level characters. And in the Kitchen is obviously a pun, if you will, on the location where a lot of the action takes place in Hell's Kitchen. So we are here tonight to talk about this. So this is episode 2 of the podcast. I guess it's only going to be like 4 since the series is only 8 episodes. We are here tonight specifically to talk about... the actual shows, episodes 3 and 4, so Worst Behavior and Royal Dragon. So, Dave, if you don't mind, go ahead and give me your basic impressions of episode 3, Worst Behavior, while I get the social media out, which should be pretty quick tonight.
All right, so episode 3, I'm looking back because I saw it last week, but now I remember. That one was pretty funny, and I think it was probably the most action-packed episode so far. I really enjoyed seeing all the characters fighting in action. I totally I like Elektra so far as well, and it's different seeing her. I think it's kind of close to the comics too. I think about how they portray her in this episode, in this series so far, at least. I like it's kind of the classic outfit, I would say, or maybe the TV show inspired her current outfit. I can't say which. So I think episode 3, correct me if, is the big reveal about who Alexandra. I think her name is Alexander or Alexandria.
Alexandra.
Okay, Alexandra. Yeah, and I kind of suspected that she was a part of the Hand, sort of one of their higher ups, but they regard her kind of as her leader, but I think she's still. I think she's kind of, what am I trying to come up with? We're in a group, and it's not like, we voted for her to be our leader, or she's more powerful because she's our leader. I feel it's more of like, all right, who wants to be in charge? And then at one point, I think she kind of just stepped up and took it. I don't think that there's a hierarchy. I think they're all equal in power. She's just the one that decided to be the leader, and I think that could change. And so as the story goes, it was her idea to bring in Black Sky earlier and use all of the resources to bring her Black Sky, which is my explanation of it is it's Elektra with superpowers, I guess, and supposedly it's not supposed to be Elektra because her memories are supposed to be wiped. But it's looking like at the end of episode 3, it looks like Alexandra's plans are backfiring. and they're not able to capture the Iron Fist in episode 3, and it just seems like things are going downhill for the Hand. And I don't know what happens with the Hand in the comics, but I'm assuming that gosh, what's his name, Tarigi or whatever, and Nobu and all that. Those guys are around, but I don't know where I'm going with this.
So by the way, Dave and I are both pretty punch drunk. So I know it's after 11 p.m. my time, and it's getting late for Dave too, who has been working very diligently all day on an IT assignment. So if we seem a little off, and I know on some of our later night podcasts on the network, I definitely have a tendency to often babble as I am ready to fall asleep on camera sometimes. So in the comic, the Hand is still around. I'm no expert on the Hand lore. I know, as recent as I guess early this year, I think, when I was doing a run in ongoing single issues instead of reading trades, which is what I'm reading now. The most recent bit of shenanigans by the Hand was they were the ones who tried to resurrect Bruce Banner, and wound up with like a completely crazed Hulk, and so the moderately still together Unity Squad version of the Avengers that Cap had been leading before he left to do his Hydra thing, Deadpool was still trying to keep them together to work, and they had connected with Elektra and had traveled to Japan to try and take down the Hand, and then wound up getting in a fight with the resurrected Incredible Hulk. So they're still at it in the comics, to some degree. So anyway, and I got to get my notes here. So this my iPad Pro may occlude my whole picture.
Yeah, there's some. Actually, I don't remember. Like, I'm not I got to apologize, everybody. I am not haven't been following Marvel comics like incredibly through the years. Just various like the X-Men maybe. So I don't know too much about the history of the Hand, but apparently Gorgon was one of the main people of the Hand, and so I don't know if any of these current people in the Hand have been in there previously, Madame Gao or Alex or any of the 5. I don't know if you can.
I think Madame Gao has definitely been a character. I'm not sure of like Alexandra or any of those other characters, and I know of their interactions and associations with Daredevil and Iron Fist. So I'm gonna start talking about Worst Behavior, episode 3. So this is the episode where the Defenders essentially really have their first gathering together. It surprisingly happens at the end of the episode. The trailers, I think, would have led you to believe it was going to go down slightly differently. So I'm definitely up on the series overall. First episode, I was not a huge fan. We got a little bit of fanfare in episode 2 with the fight between Luke Cage and Iron Fist, and I definitely kind of perked up. But man, I like literally struggled to stay awake through episode 1, and I was planning on being out had it not been for the fact that we wanted to do this podcast. So episode 3 opens up with Alexandra in a Turkish restaurant. Kind of alludes to her immortality by telling the I guess he's the actual restaurant owner, although he's directly serving her. But she it kind of talks a little bit to her immortality when she mentions the city of Constantinople, and the restaurant owner kind of corrects her and says, "Oh, that's the ancient name. Surely you mean Istanbul." And she just kind of smiles to herself as he walks away. And of course, she's mentioning Constantinople because she's been there. So still, even though, so you mentioned, this episode is kind of big because we get the reveal that Alexandra is part of the Hand. I guess I had figured that was what was going on because Madame Gao was clearly reporting to her in the first two episodes, but there's still a ton of mystery about her. We don't know what she is. I don't even know that she's human necessarily. We don't know how old she is, how long she's been around, and as you mentioned, the whole manner in which she has ascended to leadership is kind of questionable, right? There's a point. I can't remember if it was in episode. I think it was in Royal Dragon, where she meets with a member of the Hand who is, I guess, more focused on kind of his own journey than helping with the whole organization. Who is one of the four fingers of the Hand, I think she refers to it as, or just the fingers of the Hand.
There's 5 of them. I don't know if it was that episode, but it's the 5 fingers, because there's 5 of them. Yeah.
So and he kind of, like you mentioned, right? It's kind of like she wasn't necessarily. It's not like Iron Fist, right? Like Iron Fist fought like the greatest warriors of Kunlun in a tournament to become the Iron Fist. It kind of sounds like with her, she wasn't designated or chosen. It feels a little like something Greek, right? Where like the person who ascends to leadership and is the spokesman is somebody who is just recognized by their peers as being enlightened, right? And
right.
So it'll be. I'm still highly interested to see what and who she is and how that turns out.
Because one of my things that I've been wondering is, right, there's all these leaders of the Hand, right, and she's very early on, we know she's got cancer or whatever killing her. So now more than ever, she wants some sort of. I'm not quite sure if she wants some power that's going to save her, or she just wants to make sure when she's gone that the Hand will continue on. But I'm wondering why is she so concerned about cancer right now? Can't she just resurrect herself, if she dies from cancer? And why is she the only one out of the others that has gotten this life-threatening disease?
Yeah, so I'm not sure, and I don't know. There's all this discussion of you've used our final resources, and and that they've been stretched thin. So, and of course, we have this as the bookend to the Iron Fist series, which just aired earlier in the summer, and where we have I can't remember what the father's first name is, but Meacham, who once the Hand brought him back to life once, eventually he determines that he's able to come back to life all the time, right? So you're right. I don't quite get why this one disease is so impacting to her in comparison to everything else that she would have been exposed to as an immortal and apparently lived through. So I'm not sure. So most of Worst Behavior is, again, it's a lot of dialogue and a lot of talking heads, and I guess I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at the right items. Right. So, and I guess, it's a lot of character development, and that's appreciated. But, we now go through what is almost 3 hours of television by the time we're getting to the end of this, and there's been one really significant fight. And so pacing on this still concerns me. And I guess what's a little worrisome about it is, it almost feels like they're treating you like you don't know who these characters are, right? But we've
I know.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it feels very action light, and it feels very introductory to try to get somebody into the Marvel universe, the Marvel Netflix universe. Because like you said, it's very dialogue heavy. You're right. There's not a lot of action scenes. And I'm up to episode 5, and it's still very much the same. Not to say like that's turned me off. It's just I would like to see a little bit more action, right? Because we both really liked Luke Cage, because Luke Cage had a lot of action in it and some other really good stuff.
Well, and here's my thing too, right? I guess what's disappointing is that So yeah, it's a lot of dialogue, but it's a lot of dialogue with characters we've seen on screen before over the last 5 seasons of like Netflix content that we've watched, and I'm like, I don't know that I need to see another scene with Matt Murdock and Foggy in this show, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sure, there should be a quick. I mean, look, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, when you're in an Avengers movie, or the Cap movies, which are really Cap's movies seem to always be something more than just about Cap, which is cool. I love that, but it's always cool when, like, in a non-Iron Man movie, Gwyneth Paltrow shows up as Pepper Potts, and you get to see that witty banter between she and RDJ, which is neat. And I say that, and I don't even like. I'm really dislike Gwyneth Paltrow, right? So, but it's cool when she shows up, and so it's neat when they show up briefly, but like the whole scene between Foggy and Matt in episode 2 about kind of Foggy trying to keep him from going back to being Daredevil. Like I don't know that I needed to see a scene that long. So
Yeah.
and so my point is that I don't really have a lot of show notes and discussion points from the beginning of episode 3, Worst Behavior, until we're about 30 minutes into it, and that's halfway through the episode. Now, some of the dialogue scenes are cool. And the one that I have written down is at minute 31, I think, which is.
I feel a bit unstructured for this episode. I feel bad. I feel like I don't know. Maybe we should talk about what we do like, because we could focus right on like the things that are definitely distasteful. Like for me personally, on episode 3, I believe, is the one where Jessica and Daredevil meet, or is that episode 2?
That is where they continue. So he walks in at the end of episode 2. In.
But this is really the scene, right? So the interaction between those two, she tells him, she figures out that he's pretty much Daredevil because the dude's like trailing her, and like, this is a blind man. How the hell is he freaking trailing her, you know?
So that's actually episode 4.
Oh, dang it.
but they do have the initial discussion in this episode in the interrogation room.
Okay.
And Daredevil, you know, the one, I guess the significant line is Daredevil's question, you know, are you always, I forget exactly what he says, but are you always this caustic to people who are trying to help you? And of course, Jessica is suspicious of everyone to a T, even Matt Murdock. So there are a couple dialogue changes that I did actually appreciate. I did really love the initial scene. I did really love the scene between Danny and Luke when Claire realizes who it is that Luke has fought and forces the two of them to sit in a room and talk. Unfortunately, it's Claire, and I don't know what they're going to do on the TV show to deviate from the comic, but in the comics, Luke winds up marrying Jessica, and I think Danny winds up marrying Colleen. And so, but I did think that it was neat while the two of them were talking to see Claire and Colleen sitting on the bed, discussing whether not these two are going to work it out. In some ways, I wish that was maybe you can't have that be Jessica at this point because of how she is. But it would have maybe been neat for that to be Misty and Colleen, because again, my big thing that I want to see after this is I want to see. I can't remember what their little detective agency is called, but as I keep alluding to, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight eventually form kind of a Heroes for Hire private investigation agency, and I really want to see those two get together in this show, or at some point in this Marvel universe. But so at minute 31, it's strange to me. So the other thing that stood out to me in this is the intro with Elektra's training montage with Alexandra. The intro is 13 minutes long, almost 13 and a half minutes before they cut to the song. And I wonder if that's...
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought those scenes were kind of dry between Alexandra and Elektra. I'm sorry. I just couldn't get into it.
Right, and it's weird because so we already know Elektra is a great fighter, right?
Yeah.
So that it's significant that you've resurrected her, but we don't really need to see her being trained again because we already know that she's a badass, right? So I'm like, and again, you expend almost 15 full minutes on that before you cut to the introductory sequence and really start the episode. So it was really kind of strange, again, in the pacing on this. So like I said, Danny and Luke, I really love their exchange. I don't know how I feel about it. I appreciated that Luke. I appreciated the scripting of Luke talking to Danny about privilege and like Danny not getting it. But I really feel like Luke. Okay, if you say that about another person who's a billionaire and really hasn't ever had to struggle, that's one thing. But Luke lays that on a guy whose plane crashed in the Himalayas, whose parents have died, who grew up. Danny grew up as much a minority and an outcast in Kunlun as any minority growing up in North America today. In Kunlun, Danny was the only. Kunlun, yeah, I'm not sure of the pronunciation. So
no worries.
Danny was he was the only Caucasian North American male there. He was the minority and he was the outcast. And Luke just kind of laid that on him like he'd been like, you know, sipping Earl Grey tea, like living in penthouses all his life, and that's not the case. So it was about 50% effective, I feel like. But I do like it. I didn't feel like the dialogue strung it together as well, but I do like that what it really caused Danny to do was try to think of a way to solve the problem and go after the hand, not as the Iron Fist.
Yeah.
And I wish they would have linked that a little more tightly because I don't know. It was kind of buried under the I get it. Yeah, go ahead.
It led into a very cool scene, which I think was probably, you're right, one of the only decent scenes in this episode. But it's kind of like, well, shoot, what are you going to do when you get there? You know, like.
right. So we'll go ahead and jump ahead. I guess because I only have one other scene that I want to talk about before we get to the Midland Circle Financial, and that was the scene with Luke and Cole's mom. Now the reason I like this scene is because I didn't hear about. Yeah, go ahead.
It's deep. That scene's very deep.
Yeah, yeah, and to me that's the way to do a scene like that in the Defenders, and that's the way I prefer to see it. I feel like the Defender should have its own tone.
Yes.
And it's getting there. And I feel like if you are going to do a scene with characters we've already seen have these dialogues before, or scenes that have that feel or scenes that have that feel to it, make it something that is very distinctly in the tone of that Netflix show, right? And I feel that's what this scene between Luke and Cole's mother did. Cole, of course, is the young African American who Luke is who's at the beginning of this series. His brother has been killed doing some of this dirty work for the hand, and Luke is trying to intervene and save Cole before the same thing happens to him. So Cole is now in jail, and Cole tells Luke to go bring his mother lottery tickets because he knows that the mother can't reach the box where she keeps them, and so he figures she'll ask Luke. And so when Luke pulls the box down from I think it's a china cabinet, and opens the box, he sees a big wad of money with a note around it that tells the name of the company. So I just like this scene because it was distinctly in the Luke Cage style and theme. And it felt very different from what they're trying to do with Defenders.
And maybe that's what I've been noticing too, is that when you see these individual scenes, they kind of almost go back to the feel of each individual show. And then when you see them all together, it feels like this is the Defenders. Because I feel like the Daredevil scenes are they feel more on tone of a Daredevil. And then the Jessica Jones scenes where she's alone or when she's talking to Malcolm feels like it was a Jessica Jones episode. So
Okay, yeah, I could see that. So Midland Circle, right? This is what this is what we spend 46 minutes of the show trying to get to. Like you said, it's a great scene. Uh, you know, uh, Danny walks in and is definitely playing at John Wayne. Or I felt he was a little Tom Cruise, right? And kind of like A Few Good Men. Just walks in and like lays down the law, but is clearly in over his head. And I do like, again, this is similar to the theme and pacing of the last episode. A lot of times when these fights break out on a show like this, at the very last, in the latter, I don't know. So this was about 8 minutes left to go in the episode. Usually when a fight like this breaks out, I'm kind of like, oh, great. They're only doing this so that they can leave us with a cliffhanger, right? They don't have enough time to build in a really great fight scene. One thing I will give these guys, like Drew Goddard, I think who's the primary one helming a lot of this stuff, they get some really great action and dialogue in a very small amount of time, and they've done it twice between last episode and this one. So I loved the fight scene in general. As usual, say what you want about Danny, about the actor Finn and how good his martial arts style is, but again, they do a great job of the stunt work, making it look like Iron Fist never breaks a sweat, even though he's fighting 12 people. The other thing I really like this scene is when they all broke out the batons, and the thing that I immediately thought of was like, no, but there are women around that table, and I was interested to see how much they were going to get them into the fight, and they were full on into it. So, it was nice to see that a little bit of equity in the fight scene. And the last thing I'll say before I turn over to you to get your thoughts on this, Dave, is so by the way everybody comes into Midland Financial, Midland Circle Financial, I definitely, the whole episode felt like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels to me. And I don't know if that's a movie you've seen, but I've always liked these movies where there's and maybe if I think about it more in that context, the whole show will make more sense to me. There are these movies where you kind of go through the movie watching all these little smaller scenes, these vignettes of individual stories. But what's going on in the background is this weird aggregation of micro events that eventually all lead to them being at the same place at the same time. So this is very much like what is the so there's a lot of crime movies like this. I want to say it's not Boondockers, but I don't know. There's a lot of Quentin Tarantino-esque kind of movies like this, and what winds up happening is everybody winds up in the room at the same time who've all come from these different vectors.
Like a showdown, right?
Yes, with guns, and they all wind up shooting each other, right? So, so it feels like that kind of a movie. So I don't know. What did you feel about the payoff scenes in
yeah, no, I thought that was great, and it's kind of like, and then throw in Elektra, and Daredevil scene Elektra, of course, and then I love it where Iron Fist kind of just like breaks her sword and with his fist, and it's super good, and right away that there could be some hope left with Elektra because she doesn't kill as soon as he says her name, Elektra. She stops, and she kind of tries to reflect. So I love that, and I remember the character I was thinking Karigi, but I don't think he would be coming up yet because I think he's like supposed to be like the replacement for Elektra for the Hand. So anyways, it's interesting, this version of the Hand, because I feel like at least from my understanding, they're different from the comic version. And they're a much more huge presence because, you know, if we look on who's kind of the villains that we've seen so far in the Netflix universe, it's the Hand. We had Diamondback. We had the Purple Man. We had Wilson Fisk. And you know, so I'm hoping that we get to see more people. I hope the Hand returns. Is what I'm saying. I hope that it's not totally resolved, and I hope they do a better job. Because Pete's sakes, like the Hand was amazing and scary, and Iron Fist, and they're not that scary right now.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? So we go from Madame Gao to Sigourney Weaver, and now so Sigourney played, and I haven't seen this movie, but I've read the trade, and I can't remember what
the last movie I think of her is Avatar.
Right. So there was a movie earlier this year with Michelle Rodriguez and Sigourney Weaver called The Assignment, I think. That is it's a totally weirded out movie, but it's about a hitman who kills Sigourney Weaver's brother, I think. And years later, she eventually catches him and captures him, and I forget what the technical term is, but then puts him under and gives him transgender surgery, so he wakes up as a woman, played by Michelle Rodriguez. And that character in the comics, and it's kind of funny because I don't know how the artist did it, but the artist, like, it was the first run of the comic, right? But the artist, like, clearly drew the character as if it was going to be played by Sigourney Weaver. So, and maybe that's an update that they made for the trade that wasn't in the original comic, but that character was complete wackadoodle, scary. But like, so the only way she's scarier in the Defenders than Madame Gao was in Iron Fist is when you read into the subtext and the undercurrent, right? When you understand that her calm exterior bodes an absolutely sinister evil kind of beneath the surface. But when you're just sitting there kind of popcorn watching, you know, that doesn't necessarily come through. So at any rate, the fight scene was like great even before Luke walked in. And then when Luke got there, I loved how it immediately transitioned to kind of the typical banter that you would normally see in a Power Man and Iron Fist comic. You know, because Luke comes in and throws people and punches a guy, and Danny immediately goes, "Oh, so punching people is okay now," because Luke had lectured him about punching everyone and fighting his way through everything earlier when they'd met. So it's great to see that. The last thing I'll say before we move on to Royal Dragon is, well, I'll say it as part of Royal Dragon, but it'll link back to this. So, any other comments on worst behavior? Okay.
I'm good.
So Royal Dragon starts off with the aftermath of their kind of assault on Midland Circle. Excuse me. And now they're kind of running for their lives, and they take up refuge in this Mandarin Chinese restaurant. I thought it's neat that, you know, Danny talks to the restaurant owner in Mandarin, and everybody's getting to know each other. Every time one character does something, all the other characters are like, you know, how does he do that? Like, how does, you know? So we finally got to see Jessica Jones's strength on display, which, you know, Kristen Ritter's, again, kind of one of my detractions is Kristen Ritter's character and portrayal doesn't show her powers a lot. And it actually confuses me a little because I thought I knew her power set from the comics. But
which
like,
is what? I don't know. All I understand so far is super strength.
Right. So she's strong, and I thought she was stronger in the comics than she like in the movie. Like in the show, it seems like she's kind of like Spider-Man strength back when he, you know, his data entry in the Marvel Marvel Universe Handbook said he could lift like 3,000 pounds or something, so he could lift a Volkswagen. Like, it feels like that's how she's being portrayed, but I thought she was stronger than that. I thought she also had some level of invulnerability as well, but but when
sort of, right? Because she can jump off a cliff, right? And like
right,
that.
but she gets kicked in the stomach in the show, and she like curls up from it, right? So I don't know. But we definitely get to see more of her powers portrayed in this episode, and that's appreciated. So this is in this episode, at around minute 17 is when we get the scene between Alex and the old hand member who is speaking in Japanese and there's subtitles. So sometimes it's a little difficult for that acting to come through. But I felt like they did a good enough job with it for me to definitely empathize with the feeling that the other person the other hand member was feeling, and the portrayal is of a guy who, he's still loyal to the hand, and if you really ask him to do something, he'll obey. But he's really been so disappointed with Alex's leadership that he's kind of, look, I'm here if you really need me to do something, but as long as you don't, I'm just going to kind of do my own thing, right? So I'm still going to wear the jersey, right? But I don't really plan on suiting up, right, at any game is kind of the metaphor that I have in my head.
And that's kind of how I get with all of them, right? Kind of like Bakuto and like Madame Gao do their own thing. This guy does his own thing. Alexandra, and then I think the only one that we've seen that's a collaborator is the other one that's he's supposed to be like South African or something like that.
Is that the white hat?
The white hat, right. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I have a different impression. I've definitely felt like White Hat and Madame Gao have definitely been in the program, right? Like executing their own tangents of a larger strategy. Okay. So I don't know, but I haven't watched the episode you have, so there may be more revealing.
Maybe you're right. It feels weird too with White Hat too, because like I just feel like we don't get enough background on. I mean, I haven't seen like the whole 8 episodes, but I wish that we would get a little bit more insight, about how these 5 people came to be in the hand, and a little bit more about their background.
Yeah, this is. For them, this is a place where a little flashback, what's the word I'm looking for? A little flashback-oriented exposition would be fine to kind of set these characters up and let us understand, what's going on with each of their backgrounds and kind of where they're coming at this thing from. So about midway through the episode, or 2/3 through the episode, we firmly get into the interaction between the team and the dialogue in the Royal Dragon. And the big thing that I picked up on is, Danny appears to be the one who's constantly going on about, look, this is kind of manifest destiny, right? There's no way in the world that all 4 of us should have wound up at Midland Circle at the same time. Clearly, we're all supposed to work together. And in varying levels, each of them is kind of not with it, right? Luke doesn't think it's destiny. He just thinks that it's a good thing if they all try to work together to help people. But he doesn't believe like 90% of the mystical stuff. Daredevil, might believe it, might not. It doesn't matter. He just feels like there's no way that even the 4 of them banding together can really be effective. And he's still got a little, PTSD and a little hesitance because of Elektra dying. So he's really kind of.
I'm so over that though.
Yeah, it feels in general like he's trying to ensure that the 4 of them don't build a bond, because it's almost like he doesn't want to come to care for them. But I will say that element in the story feels done well because we know that that's not Matt's nature, right? That he is, I want to say he's the partnering type, but he's really not, because if you read his comic, he doesn't really work with a whole lot of people. But he's not an inherently distant person. So
right, because the last read I read with Daredevil is he had I forget what his partner's name was, but he this last blind spot, I think was his partner's name or the villain they were going against.
No, that's his partner.
Okay, and his partner gets his eyes ripped out and gets blinded. So it's always been like this I get it with Daredevil. He's always worried because shit happens, in the comics. Spoiler alert, Karen gets killed. I'm pretty sure you know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he's worried, generally he's worried, but the thing with the comics is he always moves on. So I'm torn seeing this version of him, and he's all like, I don't want to go into it. And we have to have Fogg and Karen talk to him about it. And I'm like, come on.
So the other thing that we get in this episode is we obviously get Stick coming by.
Which is good. I like him. I think.
Yeah. Scott Glenn's awesome. He's so great in everything. And I mean, he's an actor that I've grown up with, right? So so Stick's there kind of trying to mentor everybody. It's a little funny that he takes the wrong tack with Jessica, or at least that's the way it appears. But I wonder if Stick is actually even that wise to know that the way to get Jessica into the group is to push her away so that she can come back to the group of her own volition.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty neat. So and then later on in the show, about 10 minutes before the ending, is one of the more interesting exchanges that I really liked. Again, I was on the fence with it. There were elements of it I really liked, but then when I stepped back away and looked at it in a wider view, and I'm like, come on, guys, this is all been done before. So, but this is the exchange between Stick and Matt, and they are talking about Elektra, and they're making her sound like a zombie or a vampire. It's,
So I'm so over that. Move on a couple scenes. Just kidding.
Right. No, you're right. You're right. Because we kind of know how that's going to wind up. So I don't know. It was an interesting dialogue to hear unfold. But I'm not really sure if that's one of my favorite elements of the story. And then and then obviously at the end of the episode we kind of get the heroic return of Jessica, because Elektra is coming in, which again, Alexandra keeps selling her as this world killer, and I'm like, they just beat her in the last fight, right? Why are you sending her in and because they do this very big scene of her walking in slow motion. You can only see her boots, and then they pan up, and this whole time as I'm seeing her come through, I'm like, oh, okay, this is one of the first of the fingers of the hand, right? I thought it was the guy Alexa had been talking to, or Alexandra. Oh, good. My Amazon Echo that's down here is no longer named Alexa, so I guess that's why it hasn't been going off the whole time. So I'm thinking it's the guy that she was talking to who was eviscerating the bear, thinking that he's got the long black trench coat and he's going to come in looking like a guy from the Matrix, right, with the sword. And they pan up and it's Elektra. And again, I'm like, dude, they've already defeated that threat. Why are you going to throw the same and then but then at least the payoff is I thought it was really cool how Jessica, I guess she pushed the Ford through the window.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved her coming in, and walking right past Elektra like she was nothing.
Well, she's got super strength, and Elektra's what? Super ninja?
Yeah, but again, I'm also confused by Jessica's power set, right? Because right now I don't know that if she gets stabbed by Elektra, will that mortally wound her, or is she invulnerable to that? I'm not. And again, I'm not an expert on the character Jessica Jones. Because in the comics now, you really don't get to see a lot of her powers. It's mainly a private eye, kind of a crime comic. But it was in her earlier appearances in the comics before the whole Purple Man thing that you really, when she was kind of a flying, Avenger, that you got to see more of her.
Wait, she flew?
She was able to fly in the comics. So, and I don't.
Yeah, she doesn't fly in this.
Yeah. So again, I don't really know what's going on with their representation of her power set. So yeah. So any other thoughts on? I kind of blew through Royal Dragon. Any other thoughts on that episode?
No, I like to call it kind of like the Party Crasher episode, right? They're all having this party at the little Chinese kitchen, and having this kumbaya kind of like, are we a team, are we not a team speech, and then they all come in, and then it gets really good when you hit the fight scenes in 5 and all of that. So, I love the scene though where we get to see how Jessica gets so irritated. She's kind of like this helpless woman and her daughter are being stalked by the Hand, and she's like, stop freaking picking on the small guys, you asshole. And she does it in such a very kind of like, oh shoot, she's gonna come back and like beat the shit out of that guy. And that's kind of what I love about Jessica Jones is she's kind of like she sticks up for the little guy, but she does it in such a unique way. And she's very independent minded, and it's just great. I don't know. I just really liked seeing Jessica Jones in here.
Yeah, no, she's awesome in the show. I haven't watched the Jessica Jones Netflix show, but I'm definitely interested in going back and picking up on that. I'm 50-50 with her. Like, there's times when she's in a certain scene, I'm like, she's just annoying. Like from a superhero perspective, right? Like, but I like her. I kind of like her realness. Every once in a while, I get I'm a little overly with the angst, right? But no, she's. But in this episode, she was awesome, and I love seeing the angst and the lone wolf attitude are good when then you get the juxtaposition with her coming back and kind of joining the team at the end. So the thing I wanted to mention and I wanted to talk about is, in a lot of ways, so there's obviously some nice foil work going on here between the Defenders and the Avengers that I do really like and appreciate. I thought it was very interesting that Avengers, the first movie, ends with them in a restaurant with sitting around the table in a circle.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's where the Defenders start. I thought that was kind of a neat flip around. But in a lot of ways, the interactions between the characters, this is what I wanted the Justice League movie to be. Now, I don't mind Zack Snyder as much as everyone else does. I would have been fine with a continuation of the formula that he put in place for Man of Steel and BVS. But
you act like we know what's coming.
but way back in the day, when this whole stuff started, I said that I felt the best way to make a Justice League movie would be, don't focus on the Holy Trinity, right? Don't focus on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, because really that's not the interesting story of the Justice League. They're just there because they're three of the most powerful and intelligent characters in the DC universe, and so they have to be. To me, the most interesting stories in the Justice League are when you have these smaller interactions between 2 or 3 characters. Martian Manhunter, a little less so because he's kind of the heart of the Justice League and everyone rallies around him. But some of the most interesting relationships and stories in the Justice League are kind of the things you see on the CW, right? It's this special relationship between Green Arrow and Green Lantern, and Green Lantern and the Flash. And I said before the movie came out, I was like, put Green Arrow, Green Lantern, and the Flash in the movie, and make the story about them. If you're going to do Martian Manhunter, I guess the interesting action there throughout the history of the Justice League has been the the empathy between Gian Jones and Arthur Curry, right? Two aliens, members of the Justice League, never at home anywhere, but still form this bond in this central dynamic that sometimes the Justice League kind of revolves around. But telling the story through the eyes of like the Flash and Green Lantern and Green Arrow, who are all these smaller characters in comparison to Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and even Martian Manhunter, like a great Justice League movie, I feel like would have been like great scenes would have been those four characters, right, in a third-person camera shot behind them, like just watching Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman like laying waste, right, to the enemies and figuring out where do they fit in and where should they go to help, right? And in a lot of ways, this show feels like that. This show feels like four characters who they know what the Avengers are and what they represent. I thought one of the funniest lines was Matt telling Danny Rand, I know what you're trying to do here, but we're four completely different people. And he was talking about them in comparison to themselves, but it felt like what he was conveying to the audience was, we're four people who are very different than the people who are in the Avengers. And I know you're trying to make us like them or say that we should band together like them, but that's not who we are. So I don't know. Did you get any of that out of the?
Yeah, no, I didn't think about it that deep. I mean, I'm glad that one of us. I'm usually more of a deep thinker for this. I'm glad you got the deepness for this episode. No, but I'm with you now that you put it into that light, because as I'm going through the Defenders, I'm not thinking about the Avengers or any of that. But I think you're totally on board with that. And it's a weird mashup that they use for Justice League. It's like Cyborg, Aquaman, and Flash. All right, you have to have the Flash, but Cyborg, you could have put in Green Arrow or Green Lantern or Martian Manhunter instead, and it would have been, because Cyborg, I feel like, would be better bringing him into the new Titans TV show coming up.
So this is a topic for another podcast, because we can talk. But this is this weird thing that's going on in the DC universe with Cyborg. I don't know when it happened, but it is in my mind to a T. It is the Wolverine thing. It's somewhere somebody decided, or maybe it's valid, so I'll say figured it out, but I'll say decided that this character, who has historically been in the Teen Titans, had gained so much popularity that he needed to be ported to the Justice League and become a centrally thematic character for everything being done in the DC universe. And I hated it when they did it with Wolverine, and I never understood it, and I never onboarded with that character. I get Cyborg, and he's kind of cool, but I'm like, I don't understand why now he needs to be like a centerpiece in everything. So I don't know. So that's what they're doing. So I don't have anything else, mainly because it's 15 minutes past midnight. And
yeah, I get it.
So
maybe we're good. We can do a quick wrap up.
Yeah, so I want to leave the last bit with you based on what I talked about. So we're halfway through this show now. Is the Defender shaping up to be what you want it to be? So a slightly deeper question than just if you like it or not. And if it is, why? If it's falling short somehow, what is it that you would prefer that the show be, or what is it that you feel like the show needs to be doing to put it where you want it to be?
It's hard for me to say this, but I want to say that so far it's falling shorter than the other Netflix shows, because I feel the villains aren't really making it out so far. And that's kind of the hugest part. The dialogue, it's weak, but the other Netflix ones are very heavy dialogue too. But the thing that really made these other Netflix shows and a good superhero show is your heroes are only as strong as the villains are, and the villains are just not cutting it, and it's going to be a hard recovery, and I hope they just bring in the Punisher now. Come on.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're going to see him float through. So I think you were trying to say earlier, maybe I didn't track it all and try to, is it your general feeling that the Netflix Marvel Universe does a better job of creating truly threatening and villainous villains than the movies do.
Oh yeah, because it's allowed to be. I think it's catered to a more older, mature audience where they've kind of, with Marvel, it's very more Disney-ish, so they've kind of toned it down for younger kids, so they're not as scared, of what real world thinks. I mean, heck, Daredevil, a young kid, gets taken, and his dad's has beating the living life beat out of him. Like, you can't show that to necessarily a young kid that would probably watch the Avengers.
Right? No, you're absolutely spot on with that. All right, well let's pick that up in the next episode and carry a little further on when hopefully we'll have the full time. Although we probably did take about close to full time. So thanks so much for everybody for joining in. If you swung by and checked out the live show, if not, thanks as well for anybody who comes by and checks out the archive version. Please feel free to like this episode and subscribe to the channel, the E2KG Network channel on YouTube. And if you don't like the show, or you do, either way, please also give us some written feedback in the comments. We would love to hear what you guys think we're doing well. And I'd actually like even more to hear the things that you guys think we don't do well, that we can improve on, that you think might make you watch the shows on the E2KG Network more frequently, or get you to recommend them to your friends, or have other people be return subscribers. So thanks so much for joining in on this late night TV version of Nights in the Kitchen. We will be back. I'm not sure exactly when, to talk about episodes 5 and 6, and that'll take us to the 3/4 point through this Netflix show. When we do those 2 episodes, we're at the 50% point now. So thanks so much for joining in. That's going to do it for us tonight. We are out of here.